Hello and welcome to today's video. So in this one, I'm going to be doing a Dungeons and Dragons print. So these Verminhorde wrap minis are by Mammoth Factory. A lot of fun to paint. I'll be printing them off, going through the pack and everything that you get with it, and just let you know my thoughts, but also doing a really simple, but in my opinion, a pretty effective paint job. So let's get on with the video. Full disclosure, Mammoth Factory provided these minis free of charge for me just to try out, print off, and see what I thought, and just let you guys know what I think of their monthly set. Now, the great thing about this is if you are a 3D printer, you get some awesome STL. So you get all of these sort of like, I guess, rat ogre type things, these like Skaven warrior, like rot priest and everything. You get this winged rat, which is absolutely awesome. There's a whole range of STLs for you to print off. But if you don't have a 3D printer, you can still take advantage of pretty much everything that comes with it. So you get a D&D adventure, you get all of like the stat blocks that come with it, or the digital assets as well. There's maps that you can download. It's a really awesome set. I'm really excited to play these and do like a D&D campaign with them. So let's kick off first with how they are to print. They come supported or unsupported, so depending on what your preference is. They're really easy to kind of just get onto your build plate and get printing. I printed all of these off at 0.05mm layer height. I was going to go for 0.02, but it's just going to take me a bit longer. But yeah, I got them all printed off and I was really impressed with the quality of them. Fortunately for me, I didn't have any failures with this set, which is a really big win when you're printing them off, so I didn't have to do too much cleanup or anything like that. But it is worthwhile bearing in mind that these things are really heavily supported, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because it means that you're not going to have failures, but it also means that you are going to need to do a little bit more cleanup. So when it comes to like the usual hot water method I use, I still use that, but just be cautious if you're doing that. There's a lot of fiddly little things. Like these ratties have all these chains on them, they have these tiny little weapons and everything. So if you do go kind of a bit too, I don't know, heavy-handed with him, you're gonna rip off things like the weapons, you probably snap off a few limbs here and there as well. So just be cautious when you're breaking them off. Also, because they are quite small and everything, I do recommend using something like a flexible resin. I use my usual Elegoo ABS-like resin and I didn't have any problems with that, but I certainly would want flexibility with these. On the bigger ones, not too much of an issue, but on the smaller ones, if you knock them about and stuff and you're not using any kind of flexible resin, you're probably going to get some breakages on there because there's a lot of thin little bits on there. So just worthwhile bearing in mind. Moving across onto the quality of the sculpts, and they look really, really cool. So the thing about these, I suppose they're more of like a realistic type scale rather than heroic scale. So all like the hands and faces and stuff are pretty much in proportion to, I guess, I say realistic. If a giant rat man walked into this room right now, I mean, I would be a big mess, but yeah. So they're more realistic than say something like Warhammer, for example, which maybe are a little bit chunkier around the hands and faces. So when it comes to painting, just bear that in mind. When they first came off the printer and I broke them all off the supports and gave them a cleanup and everything, I was kind of disappointed because I felt like I was losing a lot of quality, but this, I suppose, is a lesson for me. Don't judge a sculpt before you put some paint on it, because that's when things really do start to look a lot better. Once I did get them primed, however, they look absolutely fantastic, and I really, really like how these look. There's a really good range of them, so you don't need to worry about that. There's a lot of details on these. There's some really standout features, like they've got these kind of boils on them for a lot of them. They've got some really interesting weapons, some fantastic poses, and you get to print off all the bases as well, so where they're kind of standing a bit weirdly, don't worry, you've got all these like rocks and stuff like that. So I really like them. Once I got the paint on there, they just looked fantastic, so I was really happy with that. If you're not overly into like the D&D side of things as well, there's a really good range with these. So I think it's probably their biggest set in terms of what they released. So you get these like 3 rat ogres, this winged rat, which is awesome, these like sewer shamblers, and then with the rats, there's a lot more than what I've actually got here. And the good thing is you could print off like full regiments of these. So I think there's like 6 in each different type. So you've got like plague rats, you've got your standard like sewer runners, you then got like your beefier units as well. And they have like 6 of each of those. Now, if you were to mirror some of those as well, you could easily get a regiment of 10. So there's a decent range of them. So if you are into wargaming as opposed to D&D, there's still a decent amount here if you want to use them for proxies for other games and stuff. So bear that in mind. Now, a quick note on scale. I tend to do more wargaming, and I don't know, when I've printed all of them off, I should have done a test print first, but I didn't because I'm impatient. All these little ratties are on 25mm bases, and when I printed them off, I thought I wanted something bigger. So I did print off these instead. I'm gonna have them up on screen. So one of them is a 28mm base and the other one is a 32mm base. So I scaled them up. So how I did this, to get to the 28mm, I printed it off at 112%. To get to the 32mm, I printed it off at 128%. That's just some maths that I did. It's probably wrong knowing me, but it seemed to do the trick. I'm not too sure though. I think maybe this 28mm one is just that little bit too big, although I'm not too sure. If I was doing wargaming with these as well and not just like a D&D campaign, I'd probably be tempted to print off at least all the smaller ratties rather than the big rat ogres off at this like 28mm scale. I don't know, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What one would you go with? I'll have a D20 next to them to give you some idea of scale. I know it's not the most helpful thing in the world, but hopefully it gives you an idea of how big or small they are. So moving across onto painting these, this was a really lazy paint job and it's really, really easy for you guys to pull off as well. I've had a hankering to do something that looks like it's just coming out of shadows, and I was going to do their werewolf set like this to have them all like this really dark, just like you don't need to be able to see the faces and stuff like that. I didn't because I like the details on them, but with these, they're ratties, they're coming out the sewers, and I wanted to do something like it. It was so easy to do. I used an airbrush for this. You don't have to, you could easily use a dry brush as well. But first up, I primed them all black with Army Painter primer. I then hit them all with the white Army Painter Air. And what I did first is I aimed for like the area, I guess, that was going to have the glow coming from them. So originally I was going to do it all as weapons. So like the weapon would be the warpstone type glow and it'd be reflecting on the ratties, but they were all holding, I guess, weapons in different places. And I just figured it would look a bit odd when they were all grouped together. So I went with the bases instead. A lot of the bases have these sort of like rocky crystal type things on there, so I just hit them first with a blast of white primer towards the bottom, so anywhere where I thought that light would be coming from, in this case, the rock. I then got my airbrush and I pointed away from where that light was coming from towards the model. So in this case, hopefully you can see my finger there, going from the rock to the bottom of this sort of like rat-winged creature of doom. Blasted it with that white as well. And I just kind of slowly brought up that white until it got to an area where I could look and see enough detail on there without highlighting too much detail, because otherwise it would look weird. I did the same again for pretty much all of them. So like this shambler thing, hit the base just down here and then aimed up towards the model using the white. Once that was done, I grabbed my plasmatic bolt by Army Painter Speed Paint, shoved it into my air gun and started blasting away. Air gun? Airbrush. Started blasting away and literally hit all the areas that had been white using that, and I got this effect. I really like it. I think it looks fantastic, to be honest. The good thing about using something like the speed paint is it doesn't cover up the black, so it's literally just gonna hit areas where I hit the white. It would slightly tint the black, but obviously it's barely gonna do anything, so you don't have to worry about going too heavy-handed with it, and it turned out, in my opinion, pretty good. Now, if you wanted to do the same thing with a dry brush instead, all you would do is obviously prime them all black and basically repeat the same steps I just went over there. So first up, hit the base with a white dry brush and then work your way up the model depending where you think that light's going to go. Afterwards, you can just grab something like Plasmatic Bolt by Army Painter Speed Paint, slosh it on there with a brush, and you're not going to have to worry about kind of spilling over or anything like that, because it's not going to do anything to the black, and it will just highlight all of that white with this nice kind of glowy effect. It's a really easy and simple method in my opinion. It's definitely worthwhile giving a go. Once that was done, they didn't really stand out too much at the top, so they were lacking some detail there. So I decided to go for some red glowy eyes. And I really regretted this step, at least the process of doing it. I liked how it turned out, but the actual process was a pain. Although it's not overly difficult, you just need a steady hand for this. So first up, I grabbed a dry brush and I used Wild Rider Red by Sculpt, and I just dry brushed around the eyes. So kind of, I guess, across the front of the face, I guess like the eyebrow areas, and that gave it a nice soft red glow that you can just about see against the black, and I think it looked pretty good. Once I'd done that across all of the models, I then grabbed a white scar by Sculpt, just dabbed it into where the eyeballs should be, and I did that across all of them. Now that's where you need your steady hand, because obviously if you make a mess at this stage, you're just gonna get white all over it. So yeah, just go slow and steady with this, dot all the eyes, and then you are pretty much home sailing. Once all of the eyes were white, I grabbed the new contrast paint Bile Red, and I did a 50-50 mix of Bile Red and a contrast paint medium. Once that was done, I kind of just slapped it into all of the eyes. You don't have to worry too much about any overspill or anything like that, because it's going against black, so it's not going to stand out too much. And the good thing about this is it kind of gets in around the edge of the eyes and it leaves that center bit white, or at least very close to white. So it gives it a really nice transition of white through to the red, and there. It gives a nice glowy red effect. So that way you have this nice transition in the eyeball and then a slight glow around the edges. And I really like how they turned out. The great thing at this point is it meant you had this really nice glow from underneath it, and then this kind of hideous glow coming from their eyes as well. So it gave a nice bit of balance. Now there's obviously more that you could do with these, but I was going to call it done. I think they look fantastic, especially when they're in the group. They look really menacing because you've got all this sort of like shadowy rat coming out of the gloom, and they've got this magical glow underneath them. I love how this has turned out. It's really simple, really easy to do. Didn't take me barely any time at all to get done, so it's one worthwhile trying out if you've got models like these, and especially if you are picking up this set. So final thoughts on this set. I really like them. At first, once I printed them all off, I wasn't too sure. When I was breaking them off the supports and everything, even though they're well supported, I just wasn't too sure about them. I love the look in all the renders. That middle bit of the process, I really didn't like the look of them. But then once I got them primed, they started to really stand out, and I've enjoyed painting these and just kind of experimenting in a different way with them. There's a really good range of models here, and then if you are into your D&D, you're going to get your campaign as well. It's all going to be interconnected with things that Mammoth Factory are doing in the future as well, so worthwhile giving a shot. Like I said at the beginning, they did send me all these STLs over free of charge for me to print off and just give you my honest opinion. I like them. I definitely like them, and it's making me really want to buy some Skaven, but I need not to go down that rabbit hole because I've already got too much to paint. So that is Verminhorde by Mammoth Factory Games. Hope you've enjoyed that video, and if you have, hit that like and subscribe button. Come along for some more 3D printing and painting content in the future. And if you've really enjoyed it, head on over to our Discord channel where we just talk all things hobbying. And if you really enjoyed it, head on over to my Patreon, because it just helps to support me making these videos in the future. Now, for the full reveal on the turntable and with some black backgrounds, here are the Verminhorde. Here is the Verminhorde. Here they are. From deep beneath the filth-encrusted sewers of the city of Marillium comes the Verminhorde, a chittering swarm of vicious rat folk. Ages of stewing amidst the detritus of the city above them has twisted these creatures into foul, mutated monsters, driven half mad by disease. And now they have spilled out of their holes and into the light of day, or the light of their crystals, as done by Sean from Grey Scout Miniatures. Enjoy.